everybody. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I'm Amy, director of the Worcester Senior Center. Most of you are old friends, and I'm happy to see some new faces. And I'm so happy we're gathered here today. I want to give a shout out to folks down the hall participating virtually. And also, this will eventually be a video on TV and YouTube, etc. So shout out to everybody. Hope you had a great St. Patrick's Day. It's my honor to introduce the first speaker. Growing up in Worcester, graduating from the College of the Holy Cross, he has served as assistants for both Mayor Joe Petty and Lieutenant Governor Tim Murray, representing the 16th Worcester District of the Commonwealth since 2013. I'm pleased to introduce the Honorable Daniel M. Donahue.
Thank you, Amy, and happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody. Erin go brah. It is so wonderful to be back here celebrating St. Patrick's Day with you, which I feel like I've done almost every year since I've been in office, and it's just such a thrill to see so many friendly faces here. That was all gathered together again to celebrate, as I always was told, the high holiday of the year, St. Patrick's Day, by my grandmother. But it was great to thank you, Amy, for the introduction, and let's give a round of applause for Amy and the entire staff of the Senior Center, Suki, for the incredible work they've done over the past 2 years. The Senior Center looks amazing. I just got a sneak peek of the Fitness Center, which looks incredible. And more to come on that, I'm sure. But we're here today to celebrate St. Patrick's Day, but also we have two very special guests. The two Grand Marshals of the St. Patrick's Day Parade. Two men who have done yeoman's work through the COVID crisis over the past couple of years to ensure our city's safe. That's right, they deserve a round of applause. We have our incredible city manager, Edward Augustus, who is a great friend of the Worcester Senior Center. Almost all the improvements to this building has started back to when he was a state senator and on through his tenure as city manager. And we have Dr. Hirsch, our Commissioner of Public Health, who has done an incredible work ensuring, actually, does everyone remember the press conferences and his incredible encouragement and wisdom during all the press conferences in COVID? It was always reassuring to hear from him each and every day. So let's give a big Senior Center welcome to the Grand Marshals, Ed Augustus and Dr. Hirsch.
Let's hear it again for Sean Lovely, Worcester PD, our great bagpipist. Well, thank you all for, and I want to thank Representative Donahue for his generous introduction. He's a great representative for the city of Worcester, in particular this part of the city of Worcester in the State House of Representatives. So he does a great job for us every day, and thank you, Representative. You know, I have to be honest with you, I thought it was weird when Dr. Hirsch came to work for the city of Worcester and he put in his contract that he had to be introduced by a bagpipe everywhere he went. But now I appreciate that he added that to his requirement. So everywhere he goes, a bagpipist goes in front of him and introduces him. So I'm really honored to be here today, and happy St. Patrick's Day first and foremost to everybody. And it's so nice to be back together again after a 2-year hiatus. So welcome back to the Senior Center. I know people have been here in bits and pieces, but this is probably the largest gathering that we've had in the last 2 years. So it's a great way to reconnect with old friends face to face and hopefully start making new friends and new connections. I also want to, before I say a few words about what we've been through the last couple of years, is acknowledge Dr. Maddie Castile, who's the Commissioner of Health and Human Services, and she's got a team of her staff here. And Dr. Hirsch and I got the honor of being the Grand Marshals of the St. Patrick's Day Parade, but the credit for the response really goes to them and to dozens and dozens and dozens of other city employees and health workers and hospitals and nursing homes and other facilities. If it wasn't for them, we would not have gotten through the last 2 years. So if we can give them a nice round of applause. I think Mike was telling me when we took a little tour of the new workout area, which is really looking good. I think you're all going to be very pleasantly surprised by the transformation of that space, which really looked like an old haunted house, to be honest with you, before. And now is going to be a bright, welcoming, 2-story fitness area where there's going to be all sorts of brand new workout equipment. There's going to be rooms for kind of exercise classes, TVs on the wall with all sorts of different instructions. So I think it's going to be a real nice addition to the senior center. And we know seniors want to stay fit so they can stay healthy and continue to live active, productive lives. And this is one way the City of Worcester is trying to provide a space so that you can do that. So that you can come here and not only socialize and have a meal and do all the great activities here, but you can also do some things that kind of physically keep you moving and keep you active, because that really is a key to staying healthy and staying, active. So we're excited about that. I think that we're on track for June, opening that. So it's really right around the corner. And then it was nice to pull up in the parking lot and see those beautiful solar arrays out there. And that's really part of the city's commitment to making sure that we're doing everything we can to lower our carbon footprint as a city, create opportunities to get clean energy, and we can see what's going on in the world, how important it is we not be dependent on other countries for energy, that we be as independent as we possibly can in terms of energy. And by using things that God has given us, like the sun, like solar arrays, and capturing that, it allows us to be more independent, it allows us to be greener and not impact the environment in a negative way. But it also helps us as taxpayers, because we're offsetting the cost of the energy and the electricity it takes to run a building like this, because we're generating our own electricity that we get credits for that go against our electricity bill. So we've not only done this one here, but we've done it at a number of school parking lots around the city. And I'm proud to say we have the largest municipally owned solar farm in all of New England. If you remember the old Greenwood landfill, it was a huge landfill for many years down the Quincy Village neighborhood. City ended the dump and capped it. It took many years to bring in, soil to kind of put a cap on it. It was raised up. You can see it if you go down 146. You can see it up. And we put 25 acres of solar arrays on the top of that landfill. 25 acres. And so that generates a lot of electricity that, again, we get a credit back to National Grid to offset our cost of city buildings, schools, street lights, all the electricity that we use as a city. And if you go around the city, you'll see we put in new LED lights in every city building, including every school, and every streetlight. There are 14,000 streetlights in the city of Worcester, and we switched them all over to LED, because that means the bulbs last longer, you don't have to change them as frequently, but they also burn less energy, and again, lowering our carbon footprint and lowering our cost of electricity. So we're trying to be forward-thinking, we're trying to be creative in ways to protect the taxpayers, protect the environment, and also deliver better services. And so these investments that we make in the senior center are really investments in you, the people who made the city of Worcester, people who've given their whole lives to raising their families and working hard, and many of you are veterans and done all the things that brought Worcester to the point that it is. And it's important and it's appropriate that the city invest back in you in your senior years to keep you kind of engaged and healthy and happy, and so we're proud to do that. This year is a special year in Worcester's history. This is the 300th birthday of the city of Worcester. And we're going to be doing a lot of different special events, particularly in the month of June. Pretty much the week of June 10th, there's going to be a big parade, 300th birthday parade in the city of Worcester. We're going to have a big festival on the Common, where we're going to have a lot of artists and a lot of food trucks and entertainment, and really free of charge and open to everybody in the community to come and celebrate our birthday as a city, our 300th birthday. Gary Rosen was here for the 200th anniversary of this city. He said it was a rocking time, so we're going to try to outdo it for the 300th birthday this year. And we're going to have some fireworks. We're going to do a lot of really cool things, road race, and we've got a couple other tricks up our sleeve that pay attention to the media. We're going to be announcing in the next week or two some other special events to really try to celebrate Worcester's 300th birthday. If you think of how far we've come in the 300 years that Worcester's been, first a town, and then in 1842 became a city, it's amazing. And I'm proud to say that this year we got the census numbers out. So you know the United States does a census count every 10 years. It's in the Constitution. It's required that the Congress do it every 10 years. And when they came back with the census results this year from the 2020 census, lo and behold, Worcester had 206,000 people living here, which is the largest population ever in the 300-year history of the city of Worcester. The last time Worcester had 200,000 people in it, just over 2,000, a couple hundred people, was in 1950. 1950, so 70 years ago was the last time we were over 200,000. If you think about that point in history, 1950 was a few years after the end of World War II. Many of the veterans were coming home, many of them using the GI Bill to get an education, begin to build their lives. Places like Great Brook Valley were built as ways to bring veterans who were coming home, provide housing for them. And the city was kind of growing. And if you remember back then, or if people have told you about that period of time, that was a period where Worcester was an industrial powerhouse. Worcester had a lot of big, heavy manufacturing entities, U.S. Steel and Wire, Norton Company, Heald Company, Wyman Gordon, huge manufacturing entities that really provided a lot of support for the war effort. They made machine parts and airplane parts and other things like barbed wire and lots of things that really contributed not only to the war effort but to the growth of the American economy. Created a lot of jobs. A lot of people worked in those factories, sometimes 3 shifts, all day long, just pumping out those materials. But at the end of the 50s into the 60s, and certainly into the 70s and 80s, we saw a lot of those old manufacturing jobs start to go to other parts of the country and then ultimately to other parts of the world. The United States didn't make as many things as it used to make. A lot of those jobs and the manufacturing went other places, and we saw all that kind of laid bare, if you will, with the pandemic, because we didn't have control over supply chain for things like masks and PPE and ventilator parts. A lot of that is manufactured in China and other parts of the world, and it was a real vulnerability for the United States not to have easy and immediate access to those supply chains to deal with the pandemic. And hopefully we're going to learn from that lesson as a country and start making things again that creates jobs, but it also keeps us kind of independent when there's an emergency and not having to be dependent on other countries, because that was a real big vulnerability. But as those industries started to go away, Worcester's population started to go down. Those jobs went away and people went to other places looking for the jobs. And I can remember growing up in Worcester, and it was kind of a period of decline. You saw, it seemed like every year there were 2 or 3 big companies that announced they were closing or they were downsizing. My dad worked at Heald Machine for 30 some odd years. Heald Machine is no more. That was a huge employer here in the city of Worcester. And across the street, Norton Company was a huge employer. And so as those went away, our population declined, and Worcester had to figure out how to reinvent itself, how to position itself so that the kids who grew up here and maybe went somewhere else to go to college would think about coming back and starting their careers and their families in Worcester. And the 35,000 kids who come to Worcester every year to go to one of our colleges and universities here would think about staying when they graduated and making this their home and raising their families here. And so over time, Worcester started trying to position itself for the new economy, the new world, the knowledge-based economy. And things like the medical school in the early 1970s, when the state decided that Worcester would be the place they built the state medical school, UMass Medical, that was really an important investment in Worcester and its future. And I think Worcester and the state have taken full advantage of that to try to build out a whole industry that was able to spin off and be co-located with the medical school, and that's the life sciences industry. So if you look in that whole area around Belmont Street and Plantation Street, you see a lot of big companies. AbbVie, for example, about 1,000 people work at AbbVie. They make things like Humira, the rheumatoid drug that are manufactured there. So we're still doing, in some cases, manufacturing, but instead of manufacturing barbed wire or machine parts, we're manufacturing biologics, things that help keep you healthy or prolong your life. And a lot of that research is going on the campus of UMass Memorial. And similarly, WPI, which has lots of great engineering and computer departments and professors and graduate students working on all sorts of really cool innovations that are going to make companies and businesses and life more productive. There's spin-off opportunities from that research. Robotics. There's 24 companies that are embedded at WPI, whether it be Toyota or Amazon, where they're literally working with professors and students there to come up with the latest robotics or the latest computer solutions to problems in industry. And so Worcester, I think, has very well positioned itself to try to grow new jobs that have futures to kind of replace the older jobs that have over time started to move away. So I really am excited about the fact that Worcester's population is at its highest level. If you look around the city, there's a lot of development going on. You can look at Polar Park and you'll start seeing buildings popping up all around Polar Park, new housing, new retail, hotels, other things. And that's going to continue to spur that investment in that Canal District area and downtown. You see the new restaurant that's getting ready to open on March 28th, the Mercantile, a 500-seat restaurant right across the street with Chris Steakhouse. And I could literally walk you around the city and you could see the investment that's happening. And people are voting with their feet. They're moving to Worcester because they want the quality of life and the relative affordability that we have here in Worcester compared to other places. And the city is doing everything we know how to do to try to continue that and to try to make sure everybody's included in that. And that means doing things like investing in new high schools. We built a new South High School. If you go on Highland Street, you can see a new Doherty High School under construction. We built a new Nelson Place Elementary School a couple of years ago. We've put $100 million into our 62 parks in the last 8 years. And we've added to the amenities in the parks. We've added things like dog parks and pickleball courts and upgraded the tennis courts and the basketball courts and added a skate park and other things because the demographics of the city are changing and people's expectations of their park system are changing, and we're trying to meet those expectations. And things like the senior center and the Worcester Public Library, things that really go to the quality of life and that provide people opportunities to kind of grow and be part of the fabric of the city of Worcester. So I've probably gone on too long, but I really am just so excited about what's happening here in Worcester. I'm excited that the Senior Center is part of what's happening here in the city of Worcester, and certainly appreciate the chance to come and share a little bit with you all. And I'm going to introduce Dr. Hirsch, who, along with Mayor Petty, and I had the responsibility during the pandemic. And I used the analogy many times. It was like trying to fly a plane and build it at the same time. When the pandemic first hit, there was no plan in the bottom drawer that says, this is what you do if there's a global pandemic, just follow these steps. We had to figure it out, like everybody did. And one of the first things we said we need to do is keep the community informed. As best we can, let's keep telling people what we know about what's going on and what they need to do to stay safe and keep their families safe. So we did over 100 press conferences in order to try to share information and advice and guidance and actions that we were taking, so that we were being as transparent as possible, but we were also trying to give you a source of accurate, scientific, medically based information to protect yourself. And hopefully, it helped some people. I know at the height of it, we had about 28,000 people tuning in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon each day to kind of find out what was going on right here in Worcester. And Dr. Hirsch and Mayor Petty were great partners in that, helping us kind of each do our little role. And so I'll tell you this last little story. When we were walking in the parade Sunday, it was a cold day, but it was great, and the crowds were out there. We were walking down the street, Dr. Hirsch and I, and people would yell out. One guy yelled, Ed Augustus, I got a pothole this big in front of my home. And I said, okay. I said, no extra charge. It's on me. And we go a couple blocks further, and then a woman yells out, and she's got a beautiful, 8-year-old boy in front of her, and she's, Dr. Hirsch, you saved his life, because he's a pediatric trauma surgeon. So that's my experience. He saved people's lives, and I gave you a pothole. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Mike Hirsch.
Well, I think of all the honors that I've had related to the St. Patrick's Day Parade, this is really important this week, because I have a great affinity for this building and for all the people that are sitting here today. Because when the pandemic first struck, it became pretty apparent that the elderly population was the most vulnerable. And we were working very, very hard with Amy and Suki to try and keep that wonderful feeling of community that you have here together in the point of a lockdown where you couldn't use this building anymore, and how are we going to somehow support you emotionally and with information like the city manager referenced. So we set up a call system with our medical students who really were interested in reaching out to you and seeing how you were doing. And I think in the end we had something in the range of about 8,000 phone calls that were made in that first year of the pandemic to try to support you. And many of you have kept that relationship going, because I know my students talk about it all the time. They call themselves elder buddies, and they were just thrilled at the opportunity of learning from you. So many of you have such rich histories, and this is the kind of thing that medical students don't always get in a 15-minute encounter in an office, to really hear where you came from, what you've been through. Many of you have been through the Depression, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and these are experiences that not every student has been exposed to. So you were teaching the whole time, and for that I'm very, very grateful. I'm also grateful to Amy Waters and Suki Lappin for the opportunity of setting up these little monthly sessions that I've been doing that have ended up on the city website, Stay Connected, which gives me a platform to kind of schmooze which he doesn't let me do very much, you know. I'm on a short leash. But I enjoy it, and I hope, and the feedback has been generally pretty good, but you can't throw tomatoes through the TV, so I appreciate that part too. But it's great to see you all back here, because while you were gone, hey, we made great use of this building. And Michelle Gray, who's somewhere out here, and all the staff here, let us use this building to set up the first vaccination center in Worcester. And on January 11th, 2021, Dr. Castile and I were here, and many of her staff, who's here too, were here, and we had our little vaccine corps that we had started with graduate nursing students from UMass and our medical students to stand up stations where everybody would be able to get their first vaccination. And we were so pumped about that. We didn't have a mega site, if you remember, here in Worcester initially. There was one in Foxborough, and there was one in Natick, and we were doing it here and using the tiering system that the Mass Department of Public Health had prescribed for us. Seniors were amongst the first tier, and it was great to see how enthusiastically you all accepted the vaccination. And you were getting the vaccination from, again, medical students who got the incredible feeling that they were actually doing something about the pandemic. That first year, 2020 to 2021, all we had really were the 3 W's, you know, wear your mask, watch your distance, and wash your hands. And finally, we were on offense. And the idea that these medical students were able to help you all get some of the immunity to keep you out of the hospital, to keep you safe, was such an elevating thing. And tomorrow is match day for the students. And many of the students that were in that vaccine corps are going to find out where they're going to be doctors. And I know that of all the things they're going to talk about in 40 years, I've been at this 40 years, my match day was yesterday, 40 years ago. They're going to talk about this experience up here at the Worcester Senior Center. So I'm so grateful that you were willing to share it with us. And I think we did a lot of good up here. Of course, we then transferred a lot of our operations to Worcester State University, where President Maloney was willing to share an even bigger facility in his gym. And that was our major vaccination center for probably the second half of 2021. And that's just another example of why, you know, I'm a New York City kid. I love Worcester. I have made it my home. To have these institutions of higher learning pitch in like they did, to have the Worcester Senior Center, every department of the government that the city manager runs was contributing, whether it was the DPW workers working overtime to get rid of all the masks that people were discarding in the middle of the street, and fire and police who were bringing in the sick folks along with the Worcester EMS services. We had unbelievable collaboration, and although we have unfortunately lost 520 of our citizens, I think it really could have been a lot worse if we hadn't had the kind of brain trust that we could develop with all of the internal resources of the 11 higher institutions of learning and the kind of docs and nursing expertise that we have in the city. Dr. Castile, with her equity program, getting to the people that are most hesitant and most in need of vaccinations. And that number rose to about 11,000, 12,000 vaccinations of some of the folks that are hardest to reach. So I want to give her table a special shout out because they're amazing. They were giving out 6 shots here and 6 shots there and 6 shots there, and add that up and all of a sudden it's 12,000. It's amazing. So I think that we're very, very fortunate in the city. We're going to be 300 years old in June, and I think you don't survive that long as a city unless you build a culture that supports people. All different waves of immigrants have come through here. That's still happening. We have Afghan immigrants coming through here. I know we will probably have some Ukrainian immigrants coming through here. It's been a welcoming home for all of them, and a lot of that's on you. You all have seen all of this in the big picture, having experienced the long life that you have lived. And I appreciate everything that we've learned from you, and I hope that you feel like we've been able to support you in the time that we're dealing with the pandemic. I don't know that we're done dealing with the pandemic. I think that's Dr. Castile and my biggest responsibility now, is to try to be the canary in the coal mine, because I think all the movements in Europe with displaced people, and they're in camps and crowded into different apartment buildings in Poland and Slovenia, and these are places that don't have a lot of vaccination, and we're going to have to watch very carefully that these variants that you keep hearing about don't keep popping up. It's a very bad setup for having communicable diseases in general when so many people are concentrated in one place. So we're going to have to watch that. But for now, I think we can take a deep breath and say thank you to all of you for helping us get us back here and to celebrate wonderful St. Patty's Day together. I'm very honored to have been part of it, and I thank everyone in the city for giving me the opportunity to be a voice piece for maybe some information and some calm, and everyone here for being receptive to that. So thank you very much.
So they reminded me I needed to do something in order to get lunch, so I want to make sure I do that. So we have a very talented artist who's with us today, Pia Samant, who was raised in India. Pia now lives and paints about New England. After pursuing a career in technology, she picked up a brush again in 2014 and commenced her full-time art practice. As a self-taught artist, Pia has learned art techniques by observing artworks of master artists. And in 2022, Pia received a Worcester Cultural Council grant to further her painting endeavors. Her work is exhibited in museums and galleries across the United States. A sample of Pia's work is installed around the Senior Center, and in June, the center will host an artist reception for Pia. So I want to acknowledge that and really make sure that before you leave today, you take notice of some of the great artwork that Pia is sharing with us here at the Senior Center, and put on your calendars that June date so that we can kind of hear from Pia and really appreciate the technique and the approach that she takes to creating this great artwork. So thank you and congratulations, Pia. And she's standing right there next to a great piece, so you can just get a little teaser of some of her talent and ability, and really take in the rest of it here. And I also want to just give a big shout out to all the folks with the ESWA nutrition program, including Susan Dinesha, Evelyn Law, and Jim Burns. And I'd also like to thank Virginia Layer, the admissions and marketing liaison, as well as a Lutheran Rehabilitation and Skilled Care Center for sponsoring the meal, along with McCreets. And I also saw Councilor Mo Bergman just joined us, and wanted to recognize him. He's a big supporter of the Worcester Senior Center.
We're going to start out today with Kurt Curtin reading some nice Irish poetry with Dee O'Connor. Have a great day.
So this one is in honor of St. Patrick's Day specifically. It's called the St. Patrick's Day Parade from South Boston, 1946. Around the corner from Norah McGonagall's flat, where the British once fired on the heights, girls in green pranced in front of high school bands, and the flags of red, white, blue, and green, white, gold were a sight to excite a boy and his da. Ah, but to Da, who stood in the cold March air when the purple shamrock, striding by all smiling, came, the moment Da had come for. Da began to shift his ample weight, Then, as the mayor arrived, Dobb boldly strode into the street, his rough hand held out far to meet the king of the Boston Irish. Curly smiled as at a friend and grandly shook the hand of the man who shook the hand. Oh, then, when my father turned, it was a man transformed, taller, all the tension gone, and everybody knew that he was grand and held electric in his hands.
Rights. Gonna play some Irish songs.
Where's that corned beef out there?
Yeah, that looks delicious. It's on this thing, feed us aft.
Yeah, I know. We don't get fed toward down American.
We gotta earn that corn beef. So I knocked that chair around, and I made a foot farewell to the challenge.